Friday, y'all.
We welcome now Leah Long, National Federation of Independent Small Business. She's the Mississippi and Louisiana Director. Hey, Leah.
Hey, how are you?
Doing fantastic. I thought it'd be good to get you on to talk to us about this latest NFISB Small Business Optimism Index. That's something that the organization, of course, tracks with small businesses, just to kind of get a gauge of how they're feeling about economic conditions and their future. And so the index fell by 2.5 points in August, erasing some of the gains in July. And I think there's still some concerns from the this was actually the report released in September. But overall, there's still some stress, some angst about economic conditions. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it kind of fell to an all-time low, so it's kind of depressing. Nothing really exciting to report.
All-time low?
All-time
low?
Yeah, all-time high. Sorry, all-time high.
Okay,
sorry.
yeah. Gotcha.
Optimism, not low.
Yes.
You're just saying their optimism is very low.
Right,
so
gotcha.
All-time high right now. Dealing with inflation, it's driving up the cost of doing business. And this last month, we actually reported that they're very hesitant to actually invest in capital projects and their inventory. So that's something kind of new we kind of started tracking and focusing on, because they're not having extra money. They're dealing with inflation, cost pressures. So that's causing them to not really invest back in their company. And as a small business owner, you want to continue to grow your business. And so actually 23% of them actually reported that inflation was their biggest issue right now that they're facing.
The data, we got CPI report yesterday. The data didn't come in showing that inflation was too terribly menacing. It was slightly higher than expectations. And of course, that's at the CPI. I don't know if we've seen the latest PPI, which could be the cost of goods and material and so forth, the inputs to the production process. So it just depends on kind of where you are in the supply chain. How much of it is directly related to that? How much of it is just hesitancy until they get some clarity with this presidential election, that they're just sort of hunkered down and just nervous about jumping out, making investments, and not knowing who's going to be in the White House and, of course, who controls the Congress? Because they have totally different visions, economically speaking.
Yeah, definitely. They have different visions. And I think everyone, not just business owners, your average American, is a little concerned about what's going to happen in November. So I think they're waiting on that. There's some people saying, the economy can get better depending who wins, which, as I said, I think last month when I was on here saying that, it's not going to happen overnight. So day after election, the economy is not going to get, tragically better. It's going to take a little bit. So I think, that's part of the issue. They're dealing still with the labor shortage and the labor quality issues. And, we're talking about on a congressional level, I think I brought it up before on here, the 20% deduction. They're looking at, not having that. We're trying to get Congress, we're urging Congress to make it permanent in 2025. And, think to inflation, if that hits and that's not made permanent, these small business owners are going to struggle drastically come this next year.
That 20% deduction, especially for your members, that's huge. Virtually all of them are pass-through organizations. They take advantage of that 20% deduction. But bottom line is 20% of your net income that in your business that passes through to you individually, which you then use to compute your tax liability. That came about in the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That's scheduled to expire at the end of 25. Mr. Trump has indicated he wants to extend it and then even add to it. But from the Harris campaign, we don't really know where they stand other than repealing the TCJA on that provision, right?
That's right. And, as I always say, NFIB is pretty bipartisan. We have people on different sides of the aisles, but we want, obviously, what's best for small business owners. So whether you're a Democrat, Republican, we are out there pushing that they make this permanent and extend it. Of course, under Trump's plan, that's the plan. Harris's, nothing's really been said about that. So when we wake up who's president, we're going to urge, to continue to do this. And so that's one thing. And I know Mississippi, we're looking at lowering, Speaker White has, lower income tax rate proposals. And that's something we're looking at and engaging into, because that's, it's going to help our Mississippi taxpayers.
Yeah. Does the NFIB have a position, Leah, on the, I guess, the competition, as we may describe it, concerning tax reform in Mississippi, either to reduce or eliminate the income tax or take a whack at the sales tax on groceries? Do you guys have an official position on that?
We haven't really got into the sales tax on groceries position, but we do have a position of obviously we support to eliminate or lower the personal income tax, just because, we talked about earlier, they're pass-through entities, so they benefit from that.
Yeah. I think that's going to be on the table in the 2025 session. I think we're going to see a lot of discussion and proposals for various reforms to the tax structure in the state of Mississippi, reducing or eliminating the income tax, one of those. I think that's going to be discussed.
I think it's a talk everywhere. I know, Arkansas just did it. Louisiana is looking at trying to lower the income tax rate here. And so I think, to be competitive in all states and make it easier to do business and, survive currently in the economy, that's something they need to look at for sure.
Yeah, Arkansas, just wanted to point that out. Of course, as you know, our income tax rates are being phased down to a flat 4%, one single bracket, all taxable income over $10,000. Arkansas just enacted into law down to 3.9. It's almost as if, we're going to go a tenth of a point lower than
a little bit lower, yeah.
Yeah, and who knows what will happen in Louisiana? The governor there has come out and said, right? He supports.
It's true. I support that. I always kind of laugh because I am from Arkansas, so my parents still live there. So they're like, oh, the income tax rate went lower. And I'm like, well, Louisiana's looking at 3% flat rate. Mississippi's over here phasing it out. So I'm like, I'm competitive between all three states around here.
Well, that's good.
So,
that's good. We benefit. What about from a regulatory framework perspective? I mean, I know your members are concerned about what the future tax picture may look like depending on who gets elected, because they have very different positions on income taxes, and that's, of course, a major expense to a small business. But regulations, you got certainly Kamala Harris, if she continues the trend with her boss, President Biden, lots of regulations came down the pike, and many of those affected your members. We've got a less onerous posture coming from the Trump campaign.
Yeah. And, I think one big one, I don't know if I talked about this before, was the contractor rule. There used to be a 3-step, I believe, quiz you take to figure out where you fall in the contracting rule, and now it's a 5-step. So they're making it actually harder for businesses to do business. You want these contractors out there and they have to figure out where they fall. Well, what happens, if they're not right there, or if you get one question wrong and you can't do the job. So it's one of those things that I wish they would just let them do their jobs. Small business owners are great. They're going to get the job done. They're making it harder. And, from an administrative regulatory side of things, it's one of those things where, like, if you're making it harder to do the job, a small business owner may not have the in-house capability to figure out all this stuff from an administrative point of view.
Yeah, they got to go hire professionals and pay them a lot of money to help them with that. And, of course, the overtime rules changed fairly dramatically here recently that have put lots of additional burden on small businesses as well, right?
Yeah, they have. And so that's one thing we've kind of been looking at. I know there's several different lawsuits kind of in the mix right now on the Supreme Court level. So we're paying attention to those, engaging when we can to make sure, to see what happens with that. Yeah.
Anything else in the state of Mississippi specifically, Leah, you'd like to see taken up that would help small businesses?
Not necessarily just in general, just, our biggest focus in the 2025 session is going to be lowering the income tax rate. So that's something we're definitely paying attention to.
I mean, we're fairly fortunate. Mississippi is not an overly regulated state. I think that's consistent with most of the Republican-led states in the South. Typically don't have as onerous a regulatory framework as you do in some of the blue states. And we're not highly unionized either, which also leads to lots of additional regulations. It makes it difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to say we're blessed in that aspect.
And I think that's why we got a lot of businesses, big and small, looking at coming into our states. Yeah.
It is
Leah,
true.
Appreciate you
got to
coming
make
on.
it more competitive. Yeah, thank you so much.
we'll probably talk again before the election. I'm sure we will post-election. Leah Long, thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you.
We're stepping aside for a break. Coming